Arizona, homeowner's best friend.
That's who we are. And this is what we do. We show up every Saturday morning to be every Arizona homeowner's happy place. If you've got a question about anything having to do with your house, home, castle, or cabin, we're here to answer that question with 50 years of Arizona home building and remodeling experience. We write an article every week that you can find in our email newsletter. And this week we try and set this weeks, sometimes months ahead of time. And I kind of wanted to do an article on permitting and why some homeowners are so reluctant to get a permit on some piece of work they want to do, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. And it somehow, in the middle of writing that article, it pivoted to permitting peculiar projects. And we came up with a couple real-life examples, and we've brought a couple in to the studio this morning who we'd like to introduce. Romy, why don't you introduce the crowd? We're talking about getting permits on projects that just aren't quite the everyday project.
So we've got the Warbingtons in studio. Ty and Wendy, welcome. Thanks for driving. I know it's a long way from where you guys come from.
It's not that far.
You come from as far east as I do west to this location. It's like almost perfectly halfway. But let's talk about your story. You were in a home, nice lot. What made y'all decide you wanted to move?
Well, the home that we had was perfectly set up for us. It was a 4-bedroom manufactured home on 1.25 acres. It was a really nice place. It was about 1/4 mile of dirt road to get down.
Nice irrigation?
No irrigation.
Well, you had a nice lawn. I just assumed it was irrigated the way that neighborhood was set up.
No, that one was not.
Okay.
And so we had a neighbor across the road who had her house for sale and kind of thought that maybe we should put ours up for sale. And within 2 days, we actually had an offer that we had accepted and thought, oh my goodness, what do we do now? Along the way, we found 5 acres of property that was on a paved road, and it kind of checked all the boxes that we were looking for. So we decided to pull the trigger and buy that piece of property and build another place.
So the 5 acres, there was nothing on it.
Bare piece of property.
And so obviously we need to put a home on it. What was the conversation in deciding what type of home to build? Do we put another manufactured home on it? Do we do slab on grade with sticks? Do we pitch a teepee? Do we do an adobe mud hut?
So we went through all of those scenarios, and we had thought about doing another manufactured home, and the cheapest one that we thought was similar to the one that we just had gotten out of. And the only other change that we had found or that we liked out of the new manufactured home is my wife wanted a 612 pitch roof, which is very hard to get. But the cheapest
That'd
one...
be hard to transport.
Well,
a lot of wind.
they actually lay the roof down, transport it, and when they get there, they stand it back up. And there are a few manufacturers that do that, but it was about $170,000 was the base price with no upgrades for this manufactured home for about a 2,000 square foot home. So we kicked around the idea of building a barn and putting a casita in it, and then building a house out of pocket later when time was available, when cash was available. And then we talked about, well, why don't we just build a metal home? Do we just buy a barn and then frame out the inside? Do we buy a kit home? There's all these options that we went through, and we decided that we bought a metal kit home that had all the interior walls were steel stud, all the exterior walls were steel stud. It was built like a pole barn where the roof load was transferred out to these poles. Looked like a very simple design, very user-friendly. It was designed for the owner to build themselves. So you didn't need a lot of contractors. You didn't need a lot of help. So that's what we chose.
And it had Wendy's 612 pitch.
It did, yes.
And that was a son of a gun to roof. Yes.
So the foundation's the same as a slab on grade.
Yes, sir.
You got your underground plumbing, electrical, concrete slab. Then from there, how do you attach this steel material? Because, if it was a masonry home, obviously you just put your grout down and stack your bricks. If it's a wood framed home, when the concrete around the foundation is set, they've got lag bolts in it that you then attach your bottom plate that's pressure treated wood, and your walls are pre-built on site and tilt up, and it's attached that way. How does this steel attach to the concrete foundation?
So in this particular kit, there are piers that are poured into the foundation, and actually the piers are poured first with we call them feet. Little, they're about a C purlin that sticks out of the ground about 3 feet. And then your actual post where your truss sits on, your post sits over that, and it all screws together. So there are piers. I have 14 piers around my house that my roof load transfers down to those piers. None of the roof load actually sits on slab. It all gets transferred to the piers.
So then once your piers are in place, how does the wall system come together?
Well, then you set up and you pour your slab, and then on top of the slab, you do just a typical steel stud wall with your bottom track and your studs and your top track. Super, super easy.
And doesn't sound like you're working with a lot of heavy material at this point, because all the load bearing is on the piers.
This is true. The trusses were 10-inch C purlin and track sandwiched together to make a truss. Those were fairly heavy. We used a reach fork telehandler to set those, but up until this point, there was no heavy equipment needed at that point.
Now, how thick is this? Is this a 2x4 or a 2x6?
Those are 2x4 walls.
And inside of it, do you just hang regular drywall? Or are you looking at, does it feel like a barn inside because it's all interior metal too?
So it kind of feels like a barn because everything's metal. But what we did was we actually chose to build a 2x4 wall around the exterior wall on the inside and make that exterior wall an actual 8-inch thick wall. So it's there was some challenges there, but ultimately we chose to do a 2x4 wall inside.
So you got 2x4 backed up. And that was my next question. Did you just pump it all full of foam after you ran your plumbing and electrical?
Sure did, yes. And so it was easy to hang drywall on the 2x4s, but the drywall guy that we used, he had some sheet metal screws that they hang drywall with in a lot of these commercial buildings. And so it was very easy for him to screw the drywall to the steel studs on the interior walls, all the bedroom walls, interior walls, stuff like that.
And then once the drywall is done, do you finish it out like a typical rest of the house?
Yes, sir.
Paint, cabinets, trim, doors, windows. Is there anything particularly special or different with the HVAC system, or was that all designed just like?
No, so there was nothing different as far as the construction on the inside. Like all of the trades, the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC, the insulation, and the drywall. It was typical. So your steel studs all have knockouts in them. And the ones that we used had 3 knockouts in them. So you would choose one of those holes to run all your electrical and plumbing through. You'd have to put rubber grommets in those holes to keep the utilities protected from that sharp edge on the steel stud. But no, it was all similar.
What was the expectation on how long this would take to build?
I expected it to take about a year. I sat down and built out a schedule sheet and gave it to the bank for a construction loan part, and It actually said 16 months. I finished it in 15 months, so we were pretty close.
Rosie on the house, every Arizona homeowner's best friend.